My son rejected me from the family New Year's Eve party. Look, Dad, you've been so difficult lately. Everyone will have a better time without you there, he said. So I spent that night alone in my house while they celebrated at the lake house without me. But the moment the clock struck midnight and the new year began, a bombshell news story about me went live nationwide. He called me in a panic, his voice shaking. Dad, what the hell did you do? By dawn, I had 47 missed calls. If you've ever been called too difficult by your own family, type I understand in the comments. You're not alone. Now let me tell you how this night changed everything. The call came on a Tuesday evening just as the rain started. I was in the kitchen reheating leftover salmon when my phone lit up on the counter. Christopher's name glowed on the screen. My son didn't call often these days. Hadn't since Willa passed 3 years ago. When he did, it was usually something practical, never just to talk. I dried my hands and answered, Christopher, hey, Dad. His voice had that careful quality I'd learned to recognize. The tone people use when they're about to deliver bad news, but want to sound casual about it. How are you doing? Fine, you? Good. Busy with year-end stuff. He cleared his throat. Listen, I wanted to talk to you about New Year's Eve. I turned off the stove. Outside rain began to tap against the window. Seattle in December. Always raining. The lake house, I said. We'd been going to the family place in Grand Lake, Colorado for New Year's Eve since Christopher was 8. Willa had started the tradition. Yeah? A pause. So Sienna and I have been talking, and we think it might be better if you sat this one out this year. I stood very still. Sit it out. You've been really difficult lately, Dad. At Thanksgiving, you got into that whole thing with me about the podcast idea. And at Sienna's birthday, you made that comment about Jason's tattoos. I was having a conversation, I said quietly. You asked what I thought. I was being honest. That's exactly the problem. Now there was an edge in his voice. You can't just be supportive. Everything has to be your way, your opinion, your judgment. We're all walking on eggshells around you. I looked at the photo on the mantel. Willa and me at that same lake house snow in her dark hair mittened hand, reaching for the camera. She would have known what to say. She always did. She would have smoothed this over, found the middle ground. But Willa wasn't here. So that's it, I said. 41 years of marriage, 3 kids raised, and I'm not invited to New Year's Eve. It's not forever, Dad. Just this year. Give everyone some space. Maybe you could spend it with Uncle Peter. Peter, my younger brother in Portland. Right? I see. I should go. We just think... I understand, Christopher. I heard you. I ended the call. The screen went dark. The kitchen was silent except for the rain, which had turned into a proper storm now. I stood there for a long moment, phone in my hand, looking at that photo of Willa. First Willa, now this. The salmon sat forgotten on the stove. I'd lost my appetite anyway. 41 years with the woman I loved. 3 years trying to figure out how to live without her. And now my children had decided I was too difficult to include in the family tradition she'd created. I turned off the kitchen light and walked through the house, past the living room with its careful decorations, past the guest bedroom that used to be Christopher's, then Sienna's, down the hallway to the basement door. My hand rested on the doorknob. Outside, thunder rumbled low over Queen Anne, and the rain hammered harder against the windows. I hung up and sat in the silence. Then I went downstairs. The basement was the only place that still felt like mine. The rest of the house had slowly become Willa's domain over the years. Her furniture choices, her organizational systems, her photos on every wall. After she died, I'd kept it all exactly as she'd left it. But down here in this unfinished space, with concrete floors and exposed pipes, this was still my territory. I flipped on the overhead lights. My workspace stretched along the far wall. 3 monitors on a salvaged desk file boxes stacked with labels from my EPA days notes taped everywhere. The organized chaos of someone trying to solve a problem. I sat down and woke up the center monitor. Lines of code filled the screen. Python. I'd started learning it back in March, teaching myself from YouTube videos at 68 years old. The kids thought it was hilarious. Christopher had made a joke about it at Easter. Dad's going through his coding phase. But this wasn't a phase. I could still hear Willa's voice sometimes, especially down here where it was quiet. Something she used to say when I'd get caught up in technical details. Norman, when you build something, make sure it helps the people who need it most. She'd been a nurse for 30 years. She understood service. The code on my screen represented 9 months of work. 9 months the kids knew nothing about because they'd never bothered to ask what I was actually doing down here. It started with a conversation in March. Retirement party for someone at the regional EPA office. Gregory Foster had been there. Gregory and I went back decades, worked together on water quality monitoring in the 90s. He'd started doing consulting work. We grabbed coffee after the party. You know what the biggest problem in water infrastructure is, he'd said? Communication. Every city has its own system. Different software, different protocols, different standards. When there's a problem, information moves too slowly. Contamination warnings get missed. Maintenance issues fall through the cracks. I'd nodded. I knew this intimately. 37 years of dealing with exactly that. Someone needs to build a universal platform, Gregory continued. Something that translates between all these different systems. Real-time data sharing, AI-driven analysis. Could save billions. Could save lives. He'd said it casually already, moving on to other topics. But I couldn't stop thinking about it. Because I'd built something similar once. Back in the 90s, working on Seattle's light rail expansion. A coordination framework that standardized communication between contractors and agencies. Nothing fancy, but it worked. Eventually, the city moved on, and my framework was forgotten. But the principles were still sound. They just needed to be modernized, translated into algorithms and machine learning and predictive analytics. And I kept thinking about Flint, Michigan, the water crisis there, thousands of children exposed to lead because systems failed to communicate, because warnings went unheeded, because infrastructure was aging and nobody had the tools to see the catastrophe coming. So in March at 68, I started learning to code. Christopher had asked once back in summer, "What are you even doing down there all the time?" "Working on something," I'd said. He'd laughed. "At your age, Dad, you're retired. You should be relaxing." He didn't understand, didn't want to. None of them did. The platform on my screen could monitor water systems across multiple cities. It could predict pipe failures before they happened, detect contamination patterns in real time. It could save lives, if it worked. If anyone believed a 69-year-old retired engineer could build something that mattered. I stared at the code at the interface I'd spent 9 months creating. It was real. It functioned. The algorithms worked. The integration protocols were solid. But would anyone else see what I saw? By November, after 8 months of work, I needed a second opinion. I called Gregory. We met at a coffee shop near Pike Place Market on a gray morning. Rain spattered the windows, and the smell of fresh coffee mixed with salt air from the sound. Gregory was already there, nursing an Americano at a corner table. "Norman," he stood to shake my hand. "Good to see you. How are you holding up?" He always asked that. Code for "How are you managing without Willa?" "I'm all right," I said, setting my laptop bag down. "Actually, I wanted to show you something. Remember that conversation we had in March about infrastructure communication problems?" "Sure. The coordination nightmare. Different systems that can't talk to each other?" "Right." I opened my laptop. "I've been tinkering with something." Gregory leaned forward, curious, but probably expecting diagrams or a white paper. Retirement project stuff. I turned the screen toward him and opened the platform interface. For the next 5 minutes, I walked him through it. How the system integrated data from different municipal water management software. How it translated between formats in real time. How the AI component analyzed patterns and generated predictive alerts for pipe failures, contamination, risks, pressure, anomalies. How it monitored multiple cities simultaneously, creating a network of shared intelligence. Gregory didn't say anything, just leaned closer to the screen, his coffee forgotten. I showed him the contamination detection algorithms, the cost projection models, the emergency response protocols, the dashboard interface that displayed everything a city's water team needed at a glance. When I finished, Gregory sat back. He stared at me. "Norman," he said slowly, "do you understand what this is?" I shrugged. "A coordination platform. Proof of concept. It needs real-world testing refinement." "No," he shook his head. "This is infrastructure revolution. This is the solution every water utility in America needs. This could save cities billions in prevented disasters. This could save lives." "It's rough," I said. "The interface needs work. I'd need access to actual city data to properly calibrate." "Norman," Gregory's hands were shaking slightly, "you built this yourself at 69, learning to code from scratch." "YouTube and online courses mostly. The core principles I already knew from EPA work. I just had to translate them into modern technology." "This is billion-dollar territory," Gregory said quietly. "This isn't a retirement project. This is a company. This is an industry game changer. I looked out the window at the rain. Pike Place, market across the street, vendors setting up under cover, the neon sign glowing in the gray light. Willa had loved the flower stalls there. I just saw a problem that needed solving, I said. Gregory was already pulling out his phone. I know people, venture capital firms that specialize in civic infrastructure technology. There's one here in Seattle, Cascade Tech Ventures. They're always looking for innovations like this. He looked up. Can I show them this? Make some introductions? I thought about Christopher's joke, Dad's coding phase. I thought about sitting alone in my basement for 9 months while my kids planned New Year's Eve without me. What did I have to lose? Sure, I said. Why not? Gregory's fingers were already moving across his phone screen, typing, forwarding. His expression had shifted from shock to something else. Excitement. Purpose. I'm sending this to their director of acquisitions right now, he said. With your permission, I'll include some technical specs. They're going to want to see this immediately. All right. He looked up at me. Norman, I'm not exaggerating. This is the real thing. This is going to change your life. I didn't believe him. Not really. I'd spent too many years watching good ideas die in committee meetings lost to budget cuts or political changes or simple bureaucratic inertia. But sitting there in that coffee shop, rain streaking the windows, watching Gregory's excitement, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Gregory promised to make some calls. I went back to work and tried not to hope too much. Gregory called back within 3 days, his voice noticeably different, charged with excitement. Norman, they want to meet you. Tomorrow, if you're available. Cascade Tech Ventures. Their director of acquisitions saw the specs I sent and called me immediately. They want a demonstration. I sat down at my kitchen table. Tomorrow. I know it's fast, but when they move like this, it means they're serious. Very serious. The next afternoon, I was sitting in a conference room on the 20th floor of a building in Pioneer Square, downtown Seattle. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Elliott Bay. Ferries cut through the gray water below. 3 executives sat across from me, composed and attentive. Gregory took the seat beside mine, quiet but reassuring. I presented the platform step by step. They asked sharp technical questions. How did the AI manage inconsistent data? Where were the failure points? How far could the architecture scale? I answered without hesitation. 37 years at the EPA had taught me not only how to build systems, but how to explain them clearly. I could tell they were impressed. They leaned forward. They took notes. They exchanged quick glances. And you built this alone? Asked the woman on the left, Sella Parker, their VP of technology. At your age, I'm 69, I said, not dead. She smiled. Fair enough. A week later, they asked me back. Same room. Same view of the bay. This time they skipped the technical probing. They wanted ownership, not a test, not a license, an acquisition. They wanted to buy the platform outright. Bring me on as chief technical advisor and build a dedicated engineering team under my direction to accelerate commercial deployment. We believe this could transform municipal water management nationwide, Sella said, eventually internationally. We're prepared to make a substantial offer. The number landed like a physical force. $12.3 million as an initial buyout. With performance incentives over 5 years, the total could reach $35 million. I stared out at the Seattle sky ferries, sliding through the mist, trying to absorb the reality of it. There's one condition, I said at last. They waited. I retain control over charitable applications of the technology. Communities that can't afford commercial rates must still have access. That protection needs to be written into the contract. They exchanged brief looks. Sela nodded. We can include that. It's good optics. It wasn't about optics, but I let it pass. The following week disappeared into negotiations. Contract language, timelines, responsibilities. My attorney reviewed every clause. Everything checked out. It was legitimate. It was real. On December 15th, I signed the final papers in that same conference room. My lawyer shook my hand. Gregory clapped my shoulder. Sella smiled and said this was only the beginning. We'll announce on January 1st, she said. 1 minute after midnight. A clean start to the year. I nodded. New Year's Eve was 2 weeks away. Walking to my car, I pulled out my phone and stared at 2 names, Christopher and Sienna. I could call them. Tell them their outdated father had just sold a technology platform for $12.3 million. But they'd already told me how they felt, about me, about my work, about my opinions. They'd uninvited me from New Year's Eve because I was too difficult to be around. I locked the phone and slipped it into my pocket. The announcement was scheduled for January 1st. I didn't tell anyone. I kept silence intact deliberately. December 31st. The house was too quiet. I woke early the way I always did these days. The bedroom felt too large for one person. It had felt that way for 3 years, but I still hadn't moved to the guest room. This had been our room, mine and Willa's. I made coffee and toast. The kitchen window showed gray Seattle morning, typical. The house had minimal decorations. A small tree in the living room because not having one felt too sad. But there was no one to see it. For dinner, I kept it simple. Pacific salmon, roasted vegetables. I ate at the kitchen table, where Christopher had uninvited me 3 weeks ago. The salmon was good. I wasn't particularly hungry. Willa had loved New Year's Eve. She called it the most hopeful night of the year. Fresh starts, clean slates, endless possibility. We'd always stayed up for midnight champagne ready. The first New Year's without her in 2023, I'd cried. Couldn't help it. The silence was unbearable. The second year, I'd made it through. It still hurt, but I'd survived. Now this. Alone again, but this time by my children's choice. By 6, I had the TV on. Times Square coverage crowds gathering. The hosts talked about fresh starts with manufactured enthusiasm. My phone lit up. A text from Margaret, an old friend of Willa's. Saw this on social media. Thought you'd want to see. A screenshot. Christopher's post. Photo of the lake house mountains in the background. Christopher, Sienna, Jason, Nicole, others. All smiling. Champagne glasses raised. Caption, ringing in 2025 with the best people? I stared at it, then set the phone down. They'd made their choice. At 11, I opened my laptop. Email from Cascade Tech Ventures. Confirmation that the press release was scheduled. Seattle Times, CNN industry publications. All set for automatic distribution at 12:01 a.m. Pacific. I closed the laptop. I made myself an old-fashioned. Couldn't do champagne. That was Willa's drink, ours together. I carried it to the living room. The TV showed Times Square, the crowd growing. On the side table next to my chair sat a photo of Willa, taken at the lake house years ago. Snowflakes in her dark hair, that smile that always made everything better. I miss you, I said to the photo. At 11:59, the countdown began, the crowd roaring. 10, 9, 8. I raised my glass toward Willa's photo. Happy New Year, Willa. 3, 2, 1. Midnight. Fireworks exploded on screen. Confetti fell in Times Square. People kissed and cheered. I took a sip of whiskey. The house was silent except for the television. I thought about the lake house. My children there toasting right now. Probably happy I wasn't there to be difficult. I thought about Willa, how she would have known what to say. I thought about the platform. 9 months of work. The deal signed 2 weeks ago. The announcement scheduled for 1 minute from now. My phone sat on the side table, dark and silent. The TV showed celebrations, strangers hugging, the ball settling into place for another year, the hosts shouting about new beginnings. I sat in my chair, alone in my house, watching other people celebrate. The first notification was from the Seattle Times. 12:01 a.m. My phone screen lit up on the side table. Breaking news alert. Seattle engineer sells water crisis. Prevention technology for $12.3 million. Below the headline, my name, my photo from the EPA archives, probably 15 years old. 12:02, CNN notification. Former EPA engineer's AI platform acquired. 12:03, my phone exploded. Emails flooding in. Text messages piling up. Calls lighting up the screen one after another. I sat in my living room TV, still showing Times Square celebrations, and watched my phone transform into something alive. Vibrating, chiming, lighting up continuously. Industry colleagues I hadn't heard from in years. Congratulations, Norman. Incredible work. Well deserved. Gregory's text in all caps. They just published your everywhere congratulations. I turned off the TV. The silence made the phone's buzzing seem louder. At the lake house 3 hours away, I could picture exactly what was happening. The party still going, music, champagne. Christopher and Sienna celebrating, relieved that difficult old Norman wasn't there. Someone checking their phone. Stopping. Staring. Wait. Norman Hayes. Isn't that Christopher's father? The phone passed around, everyone checking their devices, the party grinding to a halt. Everyone reading the same headlines, the same number. $12.3 million. Christopher's face draining of color, hands shaking as he held his phone, reading the article, not believing it. Sienna looking over his shoulder, hand covering her mouth. Everyone at the party knowing, Christopher and Sienna's father, the difficult one, the one they didn't invite, the obsolete engineer in the basement. That one. 12:17 a.m. My phone rang. Christopher's name. I let it ring 3 times, then answered. Dad! His voice shaking, panicked. Dad, what is this? I kept my voice calm. Happy New Year, Christopher. The Seattle Times. CNN. They're saying you sold something. Is this real? It's real. $12.3 million. He could barely speak. How? I've been working, I said. You assumed I was wasting time in the basement. Silence. I could hear background noise, voices, someone asking what was happening. Dad, we had no idea. No, I said quietly. You didn't. More silence. I let it stretch. His voice cracked. I need to call you back. He hung up. 12:20. Sienna's text flooded in. Dad, OMG. We had no idea. Please call me. I'm so sorry. I didn't respond. More calls came. Industry people, reporters, a water utility director in Portland. I answered some, kept conversations brief. Yes, the acquisition was real. Yes, I was excited about the platform's potential. No interviews yet. Between 12:30 and 3 a.m., my phone never stopped. Congratulations. Questions. Interview requests. Partnership inquiries. Messages from people I'd worked with decades ago. Knew you had it in you, Norman. At 3 a.m., I turned off my phone. The sudden silence was profound. I sat in my chair, the house dark except for one lamp. Willa's photo still on the side table. They're interested now, I said to her photo. Outside rain had started again. The new year was 3 hours old. At the lake house, Christopher and Sienna wouldn't be sleeping. They'd be reading every article, every mention, trying to understand how their obsolete father had built something worth $12.3 million while they were busy excluding him. I didn't sleep, neither did they. Christopher arrived at 6 in the morning. He'd driven through the night. I was already awake, dressed, coffee made. I hadn't slept, but I'd showered and shaved. When the doorbell rang, I was ready. I opened the door. Christopher stood on my porch, looking like he'd aged 10 years overnight. Eyes red and swollen, still wearing the clothes from the party. Wrinkled button-down jeans jacket pulled on hastily. Dad, his voice cracked. Please, let me in. Let me explain. I stepped aside without a word. He walked past me into the kitchen, moving like someone in shock. I poured him coffee, set the mug on the table, sat down across from him, said nothing. Dad, I'm so sorry. He started crying, actually crying. We were wrong. I was wrong, about everything. I let the silence stretch, let him sit with it. Finally I spoke. You uninvited me, your widowed father, to New Year's Eve. I know, it was cruel. I can't believe You can't believe you what? My voice was cold, controlled. Misjudged me, underestimated me. Decided I was too inconvenient to include all of it. He was sobbing now. Everything. I'm so sorry. Sorry isn't enough. At 7, Sienna arrived. She must have left right after Christopher, driven separately. Also crying, also apologizing. I looked at both of them sitting at my kitchen table. My children. First your mother died, I said. Then you decided I was too difficult to be around. They both looked destroyed. Dad, Christopher said, the money, the success. We had no idea you were working on something, so you keep talking about the money. I opened my laptop on the table, turned the screen toward them. The home page loaded. Willa Hayes Memorial Water Safety Foundation, her photo there. The one from our anniversary 10 years ago. Smiling. Beautiful. Christopher leaned forward, read the text. His face changed. Date established November 15th, 2024. He looked up at me. That was 3 weeks before Thanksgiving. Sienna was reading over his shoulder. Initial endowment, her voice trailed off, $8 million. That's almost all of it, Christopher whispered. Your mother always said something, I told them. When you build something, make sure it helps the people who need it most. She was a nurse for 30 years. She understood service. I walked them through it. The foundation's mission. Free platform access for communities that couldn't afford commercial rates. Small cities. Poor regions. Places like Flint, Michigan, where children were poisoned because systems failed. You gave away $8 million? Christopher's voice was barely audible. Your mother died of cancer, I said. Children in Flint died from lead in their water. I built something that saves lives. Money is just the tool to do that. Sienna was crying harder now. Dad, this is what I try to do. In my work, social services, Helping vulnerable communities? You're doing it on a scale I can't even imagine. I know, I said. You just never asked what I was working on. Christopher put his head in his hands. We thought this was about getting rich. No, you thought I was obsolete. There's a difference. I closed the laptop, looked at both of them. Now you know who I am, what I value. I don't need your approval. I don't need you to include me. But if we're going to rebuild anything, it starts with respect. Not for what I accomplished, for who I've always been. I pulled a folder from the counter, showed them. Information about relocating. Portland, maybe. Near Peter. Starting over somewhere my children hadn't decided I was a burden. Dad, no. Christopher looked panicked. Please, give us a chance to fix this. Time, I said. That's what I need. And proof through actions, not words, not guilt. Not because I made money. Because you actually want me in your lives. I made no promises. Neither did they really. They just nodded, accepted. What else could they do? They left at 8. I had a board meeting at 9. January became February. I focused on work. Cascade Tech gave me an office in their downtown Seattle building. 20th floor view of the sound. A team of 12 engineers, most of them young enough to be my grandchildren. They were smart, curious, respectful. They asked good questions and actually listened to the answers. For the first time in years, I felt alive, purposeful. Every morning I woke up with somewhere to be, something to build, people who valued what I knew. Christopher reached out in late January. Professional email. Would I be willing to look at a marketing proposal? I almost deleted it, but something made me open the attachment. He'd done his homework, real homework. Market segmentation for municipal water utilities. Pilot city identification based on infrastructure age and budget constraints. Case studies from similar technology adoptions. This wasn't just an idea, it was a strategy. I agreed to a 30-minute meeting in March. It stretched to 2 hours. Christopher listened, took notes, asked follow-up questions. Didn't mention New Year's Eve or the lake house or anything personal, just work. By May, we were collaborating on the residential market expansion. He was reliable, consistent, professional. Sienna approached me separately about social impact. She wanted the platform to prioritize vulnerable communities, environmental justice, making sure the technology served people, not just profit. Show me a proposal, I said. She delivered. Detailed framework, advisory board structure, metrics for measuring community impact. It was good. Really good. I'd like to chair the advisory board, she said. If you'll let me. I nodded. Prove it works. She did. By summer, both of them were part of the Cascade ecosystem. Christopher leading marketing, Sienna heading social impact initiatives. Small moments accumulated. Christopher actually listening in meetings instead of waiting to talk. Sienna asking real questions about water chemistry and infrastructure vulnerabilities. Neither of them pushed for personal reconciliation. They just showed up, did the work, respected my space. In August, the foundation deployed its first system. Small town in Michigan. Population 8,000, 20 miles from Flint. Their infrastructure was nearly as old, their budget just as tight. The platform detected elevated lead levels in a residential sector. Early warning. The city acted immediately. Replaced pipes before any children were exposed. Before it became a crisis. Before it became another Flint. I drove there, met the mayor in person. She was young, maybe 40, and she cried when she shook my hand. You saved our children, she said. Flint happened right there, 20 miles away. We saw what it did, and you stopped it from happening here. I thought about Willa, about her saying that what we build should help people who need it most. This was success, not the 12.3 million. This. Gregory called me in September. They're really trying Norman. I know. Are you going to forgive them? I don't know yet. By November, the platform had expanded to 15 cities. Christopher's marketing had been crucial. Sienna's impact framework was being adopted as industry standard. The team invited me to a celebration dinner. Christopher and Sienna would be there. I declined, but I thanked them for the invitation. Progress, but measured. In early December, Christopher called, his voice careful. Dad, we're planning New Year's Eve at the lake house again. Sienna and we'd really like you to come, if you're willing. I didn't answer right away. I drove to Grand Lake on December 30th. The drive from Seattle took 2 days. I wanted the time alone, time to think, time to decide if I was ready. I arrived late afternoon. The lake house looked the same. Log exterior, steep roof, mountains behind. But something felt different. Christopher and Sienna were on the porch when I pulled up. They came down the steps together, nervous. "Dad," Christopher's voice was quiet. "Thank you for coming." It was genuine, not performance. New Year's Eve was different this year. No big party. Just family. Jason and Nicole. A couple of Christopher's colleagues. Maybe 10 people. And the conversation included me. They asked about the foundation, about Michigan, about expansion plans. They waited for answers. They listened. Christopher talked about residential market strategy. Asked my opinion. Actually wanted to know. Sienna showed me the impact report. 3 more cities approved for foundation deployment. Communities that couldn't have afforded the platform. I watched them. Saw how they'd changed. It wasn't complete, but it was real. At 10, Christopher asked me outside. The deck overlooked the frozen lake. Cold, clear, stars sharp in the mountain air. "Dad," he said, "last year I'll never forgive myself. I waited, not just on inviting you, years of not listening, not seeing you." His voice broke. "The platform is incredible. The foundation is incredible. But that's not why I'm sorry. Even if you'd never built anything, I should have been there. After Mom died, always." I looked at the frozen lake. "Yes, you should have." Silence. "But you're here now," I added. "That's something. Is it enough? I don't know yet, but it's a start." At 11:45, we gathered inside. Champagne was poured. First time I'd touched it since Willa died. Sienna raised her glass. To new beginnings. To listening. To Dad, who never stopped building, even when we stopped paying attention. Her eyes were wet. So were Christopher's. At midnight, we counted down. 10, 9, 8. I held the champagne. Thought of Willa. She would be proud. Not of the money. Of what we were building with it. Happy New Year? Everyone hugged. Christopher and Sienna embraced me. Careful. Respectful. I allowed it. Brief. Not declaring everything fixed. Not pushing away either. After I watched them clean up, they glanced over, made sure I was included. Small smiles. Not perfect, but trying, really trying. I thought we'll see if this lasts. But tonight, I wasn't invisible. Later, alone in the guest room, I looked out at the lake, the stars, the mountains. At 69, I was learning something new. Forgiveness isn't a moment. It's a process. A daily choice. A slow thaw. Tomorrow, I had a foundation board call. 3 more cities approved. Willa's legacy growing, children's lives protected, water kept safe. That's what mattered. The work, the impact. And maybe standing here in this room where I'd been excluded a year ago, included now, not by obligation, but by something harder earned. I was learning that age doesn't define what you can build. 69 wasn't an ending. It was just another beginning. At 69, I was learning something new. Forgiveness isn't a moment. It's a process. And maybe, just maybe, we were finally starting. Looking back now, I see the truth clearly. I almost let pride and hurt cost me everything that mattered. I almost walked away from my children permanently convinced that vindication was enough. But God has a way of softening even the hardest hearts, and I'm grateful He gave me the patience to see their genuine change. If you're facing something similar, don't make my mistake. Don't let wounded pride replace the possibility of reconciliation. Yes, demand respect. Yes, set boundaries. But leave the door open for grace. God teaches us forgiveness is a process, not a single moment, and that lesson saved my family. The foundation continues to grow. 15 cities now, lives protected, water kept safe. But you know what matters more? Christopher calls every Sunday. Sienna brings her kids to visit. We're building something together now, not just professionally, but as a family, learning to listen. These grandpa stories aren't just about success or vindication. They're about second chances, about remembering that God can work through our pain to create something beautiful, about understanding that at any age we can still build, still grow, still matter. At 70 now, I'm teaching my grandchildren to code. They think it's hilarious, but they're listening, really listening, and maybe that's the greatest success of all. If this story touched your heart, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Have you experienced something similar? How did you handle it? Please share this video with someone who needs to hear that it's never too late for new beginnings. And don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring grandpa stories that remind us all that our best chapters might still be ahead. These grandpa stories matter.